release my grip. Homies bounce their heads while honeys shake their hips. The flow is smooth, flowing through my lips. Fucked by the ton, in English is called kick. The brain is transformed by the beats my flips. In the terror dome of the underground, respected for my lyrics, noted for the sound. The clash of the warrior, the metal clanging sound. It's all about survival with the bare essentials, with the right credentials, rock vibes on instrumentals.
That's the life of the ID. You sucker MC. I That's the life of the ID. You sucker MC. I That's the life of the ID. You sucker MC. I That's the life of the ID. You sucker MC. I
Take that, get back, catch a heart attack. Bring your best rhyme at me, watch it get ransacked. Cause I want track, as I lay down the smack. I'm off the hook, I'm off the rack. Open palm smack, make them get back like a shack attack. Vibe like the Mac with the top drop back. Nobody knows how the top cat flows. I'll put them in a row and watch them fall like dominoes. Show after show, collect my dough. Hands in the air, rockin' to and fro. Hands in the air, rockin' to and fro.
That's the life of the ID. You sucker MC. I That's the life of the ID. You sucker MC. I That's the life of the ID. You sucker MC. I That's the life of the ID. You sucker MC.
I know you're feeling this. I rock rhymes and keep it raw. Shatter glass doors with my top cat claws. Battle rap wars, leave opponents in gauze. Rebel without a pause, executing no flaws. I grip the mic device, mad tight. Don't want to rampage and get wild for the night. MCs fuss and fight, cause they can't get it right. They go off the right, salvation like Daddy White. Alright, we can get it on. Word is born, chillin' like a door, sipping the Perignon. Potholes in my lawn, left side is born. Yo, this shit on.
That's the life of the ID. You sucker MC. I That's the life of the ID. You sucker MC. I That's the life of the ID. You sucker MC. I That's the life of the ID. You sucker MC.
All right, so we are back. What's going on, man, Hatter?
What's going on, man? Conscious discernment. Just chilling, baby.
Everything's good. You know, I had to give the people a new, at least try to give us a little intro.
Yeah, ain't nothing wrong with that. Ain't nothing wrong with that. You know, getting a little bit of that Tomcat. That's the life.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So, man, here we go back tonight. Yeah, you know it. So here we are back tonight with our Dark Lord.
Yeah, we took a little bit of a vacation, but you know that's how life goes, man. You know, sometimes we get potholes in our lawn, and we just gotta, you know, kind of like what they said in the rap. You know what I'm saying? We had potholes in our lawn, you know. So
yes, sir.
So, you know, we had to detour a little bit, but we back on track, you know.
Sometimes you're going to detour in life, but you're still going to get to where you need to be. But you can't do that when you're on your knees begging and pleading to something outside of yourself, when you know you got to do all the work.
Yeah, you know, we talking about, you know, waking people up, man, and it ain't about waking people up. It's about reaching the people that want to be woken up, the people that's already awake, you know, in sleep paralysis or partially awake, and they're looking for something other than the traditional goofy nigga with a hat on. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And when I say goofy nigga with a hat, I'm talking about all these different religions and, you know, people wearing their symbolism and their garb, and they thinking that it's something special, you know, because it's all about feel good. You know what I'm saying? And it kind of reminds me of Farrakhan, you know, back in the day, man, when he was fired, when he said, you know, he said black people are, and I use the term black people, you know, I know the stigma behind that, but for the understanding of the masses, they rather be seen and heard than have something in their pocket or in their head, you know, have knowledge of yourself. Because what a lot of people have done was they walk around here and they think that they feel like they got it going on, reading from these books telling you, oh yeah, this is truth, man. The Bible's truth, this book's true, all this kind of stuff. And what they don't realize is that all they doing is projecting it's just like a drug addict. You just switching drugs, you know. You just getting a different drug, man. I mean, you just got a different God. You know, whether it's Jesus, whether it's Yah, whether it's Wade, whether it's Yahweh, whether it's Allah, or whoever the hell you want to, whoever you want to. You know, if you using these gods as part of the polarities of you, or part of your anatomies, or part of your energies that you are working to gain something, that's one thing. That's cool. But if you projecting these gods outside of you and you are worshiping them, well, I mean, that's your deal, man. You know what I mean? But when it gets to that point, when you're looking at your gods like that, and some people gonna get upset about this, but I'm gonna say, man, fuck your gods. And ain't a goddamn
All right.
thing to do about it. But anyway, let's get to it.
Let's get right back into it, everybody. All right, so just remember, the higher you go up on the pyramid, the less bricks you got. So everybody can go with you. Just remember that. All right, so we are back with Peter Lavenda's The Dark Lord. So we will be covering chapter 3 tonight, Unspeakable Cults. All right, so here we have chapter 3. All right, so Robert E. Howard was one of the circle of fantasy authors around H.P. Lovecraft, sometimes referred to as the Lovecraft Circle. He contributed to what has become known as the Cthulhu Mythos by writing stories such as the one excerpted above, which referenced Lovecraft's Cthulhu, the Necronomicon, and other motifs. One of his contributions to the mythos was the fictional nameless cults by von Juntz, which became the awkward, oh man, that's a crazy German word, Unausperlichen Kulten, in Lovecraft's German recension, and from there into Unspeakable Cults. Howard's most famous creation, however, was Conan the Barbarian, the fantasy character made even more famous by the actor Arnold Schwarzenegger. In 1936, at the age of 30, Howard committed suicide. He was not the only member of Lovecraft's inner circle to do so. In 1951, he would be followed by Robert H. Barlow, the noted anthropologist of ancient Mexico, expert in the Nahuatl language, and the literary executor of Lovecraft's estate. He committed suicide in Mexico at the age of 32. One of the prevailing themes yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, you remember a time I told you when I actually met Cthulhu when I was on acid, and it asked me, said, are you scared? And when I was in there, when I was looking at this entity, and I could feel the strength, I could feel the power, and I was like, I'm not necessarily scared, but I'm not gonna say that I'm not a little intimidated, and I don't feel your energy, but I can tell you, someone that didn't have the gnosis and didn't have the understanding would consider you to be pure evil. And the funny thing is, now I wouldn't feel comfortable without seeing Cthulhu moving on my wall as a shadow being at night when I go to sleep. You know, what I'm saying is, when you first encounter these energies, man, and you're under some type of mind expanding substance, these entities are really coming to you. This ain't no joke. You know, I mean, you can say what you want to say. This ain't no joke, because I see them
It's
now.
real deal.
Because
I've
like
been
I
there
said, you
too.
know, since I had my experience, man, you know, I quit drinking, smoking, you know, cigars. I was smoking Cuban cigars, man, smoking weed, man, drinking alcohol, man. You know, I was doing all kind of shit. I quit cold turkey. You know what I'm
Yes,
saying?
sir.
And I
All
have
right.
not touched
So,
them. Yeah. So, um, but and I deal with these entities straightforward now. But what I'm
right.
telling, but what I'm saying is, man, that these entities, man, when they talking about these people committing suicide, I can understand that, because, first of all, if you ain't supposed to be messing with these entities, or if you don't come at them the right way, man, you know, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, ain't no telling what's gonna happen, man. You know what I'm saying?
Right, right. You want to come at them like they're your sister, your brother, your homeboy, and even sometimes you got to treat them like your children because you are older than them.
But you turn around, man, and you know, like I say, these people, you know, they talk all this noise and all this trash, man, and you know, they try to make you sound be condescending, and we know who we talking about. We talking about, you know,
Right, right.
and you know, even when it come down to these occult people, oh, they got so much mouth. But let me tell you something: when you get in that spirit world, man, that ain't no joke, cuz you can't
No joke.
bullshit the spirit world. You hear what I'm telling you?
You cannot.
I've seen the feathered serpent.
Yes.
I've seen Cthulhu. I've seen the angel of death. And you yourself
Mm.
even seen the Baphomets.
Yes,
You know what I'm saying?
sir.
The little Baphomets playing. So I've been saying, man, look, all I'm trying to tell you is, you can be as scared as you want to be of all this stuff, but I have never met an evil spirit. I have never met an unclean spirit. It's just your understanding of it, because what I'm telling you,
Yes.
man, it's all good. It's all
Yes. And
you.
the biggest thing, that sometimes I have conversations with people who are still tied in with religions, and I'm not going to ever try to pull anybody away from their respective religion. I'm never going to do that. But one thing I always tell them is I've seen some of those entities in those realms, and a lot of people who dabble in psychedelics and whatnot see those entities. But at the same time, I always remind people, no matter how much the most vicious murderer or killer, or no matter who you think is an upstanding citizen and they better than you because their bank account or how big their house is, if they are tied to the blonde haired blue eyed messiah, or if they are tied to arm leg arm head Allah, you considered weak to these entities, and in that realm the weak cannot survive.
I mean, even if you want to play the game about the black Jesus, man, fuck black Jesus. He ain't even exist either. Ain't none of them exist. You know what I mean?
Yes, sir.
I
Yes,
mean,
sir.
we
Well,
know what the Christos is. We know what the Christ is, man. You know what I'm saying? We know what the Tikkun is, man. We understand what
yes,
the
sir.
Philosopher's Stone is, and you got to understand that, you can hear a lot of different people give you a lot of different definitions of this thing, and I don't have no problem with that, because people have to take the gnosis and cater it
Yes.
to their physiology.
All right. Well, hey, let's go ahead and get back into it because we got a lot to cover tonight.
Tenfold, let's get on it, brother.
All right. So, one of the prevailing themes in Grant's work, and especially in that of Lovecraft and his circle of fellow Gothic horror writers, is of cults that are either African, Afro-Caribbean, Middle Eastern, or Asian. In other words, that could be defined as non-Western. While Crowley speaks of these cults in passing, he does not focus on them to the extent that Grant does. This is very important, and Grant does so because he feels that the practices and beliefs of these cults hold keys towards understanding and underlying themes and techniques of occultism in general and Thelema specifically. Thelema's origins, as described in the previous 2 chapters, can be found in the interpretation of Egyptian mysteries by the British organizers of the Golden Dawn, the secret society in which Crowley was initiated, and their re-evaluation and reimagination by Crowley himself. Most of the religious references in the Book of the Law are to Egyptian god forms, familiar to anyone who had been through the initiatory system of the Golden Dawn. But there are tantalizing references to other schemes of initiation. In the Golden Dawn, and while Crowley did immerse himself for a while in Asian methods of magic and mysticism, his focus always remained on those systems that were most familiar to Westerners, and those elements of Asian systems that were already in translation in English. He had virtually no background in African or Afro-Caribbean systems. This is very important. He was thus limited in his ability to draw the same inferences and conclusions of later occultists like Bobby Hemmett or Brother Panic or the Mad Hatter, of later occultists who had access to greater resources, either in translation or through direct experience of the non-Western systems. So what they're saying here is, even though Aleister Crowley is on all of these t-shirts and, most of, the occult community that wanted to follow him, they don't really dig into it and say, well, he had no knowledge of the African and Afro-Caribbean spiritual systems. So he was limited, even with all of this Golden Dawn and the Book of Thelema and, a lot of these sources that are out here, which are great books. But if you're not going to take everything that's out there, you're kind of throwing the baby out with the bathwater. So, all right, so we're going to skip to a quote from Robert E. Howard. Weird fictions seem to vie with works of witchcraft, voodoo, and dark magic. We're on page 129. All right. It is the contention of this writer, as well as of Kenneth Grant, that Lovecraft in some way unconsciously probably was in touch with or otherwise aware of the same spiritual material that informed Crowley's contact in Cairo in 1904. We have seen in the previous chapter how closely events in Lovecraft's Call of Cthulhu mirrored Crowley's Holy Book revelations. There are other parallels and other synchronicities between the 2 writers, and as we proceed with the investigation, we will look at some of them. What is compelling about these correspondences is that the one amplifies and explains the other. Grant's genius lay in making those initial connections between the horror writer on the one hand and the prophet of the New Age on the other. It was a bold contention, for it was in danger of making modern occultism look like some kind of role-playing game, a sword and sorcery affair replete with scary monsters and secret books. All right, so this is very important because the Mad Hatter covered some info about the Yazidis in our last podcast in the last chapter. So several of the cults most important to Lovecraft's stories are precisely those that intrigue both Crowley and Grant. These include the Haitian religion of voodoo, also spelled voodoo or Vodun, and the Mesopotamian religion of the Yazidi. Voodoo makes its appearance in Lovecraft's Call of Cthulhu, as well as throughout Grant's published work. Grant's interest in this Afro-Caribbean religion was intensified through his relationship with Michael Berto, who was born in 1935 of La Couleuvre Noire, the Black Snake, an occult order based on Haitian voodoo, with ideas and methods derived from the Western mystery traditions, as well as Lovecraftian and Thelemic elements. All right, so here we have our section on syncretisms and yeah, go ahead.
I'm just gonna say this, man, and I'm not gonna be long with this. The one thing you gotta understand as a true chaos being or true melanin possessing being is you cannot be scared when you come in contact with these entities. You got to understand, man, that when you come in there, they're just as happy to see you as you are to see them if you come on the same level. All this bull crap these mother scratchers be telling you, man, about all this fear and all this butt kissing and bowing down, man. Look, man, you it's like anything else. You go in the hood acting like a punk, you gonna be punk. But if you go in there understanding who you are, man, and meeting that energy, man, and kind, man, it's gonna meet you the same way. I'm not saying you disrespect it, but you don't go in there, you don't go and meet that energy like you some kind of subordinate to it. Because if you go in there and meet it like a subordinate, you gonna be treated like one.
Mm-hmm.
That's just my experience. Like I said, I have never met an evil spirit yet. But anyway, let's carry
All right. Okay. All right. So Berto had spent some time in Haiti before embracing his own particular occult path and became a member of a society, Ordo Templi Orientis Antiqua, or OTOA, allegedly created by a mysterious and possibly non-existent Haitian occultist, Lucien Francois Jean Maine, who lived from, they think, 1869 to 1960, of whom there is very little information. The OTOA was evidently a mixture of quasi-Masonic ritual and initiation and traditional, Vodun forming a bridge between European-style ceremonial magic traditions and the Afro-Caribbean Vodun cults. Jean May was allegedly the inheritor of an ancient Haitian occult lineage that numbers among its lineage holders the Venerable Orde des Elus Cohen, which had a branch in Leongain, Haiti. This is not the place to go to in the history of the Elus Cohen or the elect priests. So suffice it to say that it was a branch of the 18th century Martinist order, and the branch most closely concerned with ritual magic. Martinism began as a Masonic type society in pre-revolutionary France, but its founder, Martinez de Pascali, died in Haiti in 1774. Haiti at the time was a French colony, hence the suggested French Masonic Haitian Vodun connection. Berthaud worked and expanded upon the system he inherited and brought it into line with Thelema by 1972. His Vodun Gnostic workbook became quite well known for its imaginative combination of Western era esotericism, Afro-Caribbean concepts and terminology, and sex magic. This is also a book that was referenced by Bobby Hemmett, the Vodun Gnostic workbook. Kenneth Grant saw in Berthaud's work a verification of his belief that the Thelemic magical current had to be all-inclusive. If it represented a genuine change of Aeon, that meant that analogs had to be found in African, Latin American, and Asian traditions, as well as the more familiar European and Middle Eastern practices. Not only that, but these traditions also hold keys to the full implementation of the current based on their knowledge of occult matters and technology stemming from their own environment, culture, and history, and which might be either ignored or missing in Western systems. Knowledge to Grant is power. All knowledge is power. That's why we're here tonight. All right, so as we mentioned above, Crowley's own knowledge of these practices was thin, so he didn't really know a lot. This is not to criticize Crowley, for deep understanding of these mystical technologies had always eluded Western observers, and there were few who had the requisite background in the languages and rituals of India Africa, and the indigenous cultures of all continents in the early 20th century. That would gradually change. And by the beginning of the 21st century, a growing number of religious studies and anthropology scholars have made tremendous inroads into Chinese, Tibetan, Mongolian, African, and Afro-Caribbean languages and scriptures, both written and oral. Grant's contribution was to make as much use as possible of the growing body of esoteric literature in translation from Asian and African sources in order to elaborate upon Thelemic themes and to create a more powerful ritual machinery for probing the darker side of occultism. All right, so we're going to jump down to the next paragraph on something very important with Berthaud. So Berthaud and the tantric expert David Kerwin were able to contribute to Grant's knowledge of non-European occultism in more important ways. So even Grant knew that just having certain knowledge from certain cultures, that even Grant is a Caucasian man, he's a white man, but he understood that he could not tap into this power that he was trying to get, or Crowley was trying to get, because they were limited, because they weren't African or they weren't Asian, so they didn't have those mystery systems within the European culture. So
but I will tell you this much here. Now, a lot of people not gonna like this, but I always said there really was nothing but one race, and that every other ethnic group that you see either came through some type of mutation or gene manipulation. And some of these people that you might see that you might call white really have enough of what is needed in the DNA in order to function like we do. You know what I'm saying? So technically they're black, but they look white. And there's been a lot of stories of black people that have passed for white. You see what I'm saying? And it's no different than saying, look, man, it's not how much melanin you have, is do you have enough to do what you need to do. And I can't tell you what it is to have enough, because you're gonna find out when you take your last breath and shit your pants. You're gonna find out if you got it or not, if you got the information. If you don't have the information, you might be in for a hell of a shock. You know what I'm saying? I mean, if you don't have what it takes. But like I said, that's not my problem. But there's nothing wrong with getting the information and trying to use the key. If the key fit, hey, you can get out the door. If the key don't fit, you got a problem. Isn't that pretty simple? And I mean, people
sounds simple to me.
Huh? I mean, people can believe what they want to believe, and I don't understand why people get so upset when they hear someone claim, when they use the occult, they say, "Oh no, why you don't want to give black people the credit for this and that?" Man, does it really matter? Man, let people believe what they want to believe. Let people practice what they want to practice. Let people say what they want to say, because when you die, it's gonna all be a personal journey. You're not gonna have nobody. You're not gonna have no group session there cheering you on. You ain't gonna have no collective sitting there cheering you on when it's time to die. When it's time to die, it's just your monkey ass. You know what I'm saying?
That's it. I ain't never seen no bunk bed or no casket.
That's what I'm talking about, brother. You know what I'm saying? So, and why you here? Why me personally, I don't mind having some peace amongst people. You know what I'm saying? People like, oh yeah, I mean, I don't understand. I mean, I laugh even when it comes down to people that we live in their head rent free. I'd rather get along with them because I just want peace, man. I can give a rat's ass what you think about me. You know what I mean? I just want to have some peace,
all right,
man. But anyway, let's get back on the journey.
All right,
here.
So we're on page 131 at the bottom. All right. Heretofore, the occult and esoteric practices of any culture were basically consistent with that culture and its religious and magical ideas. This was the case even when there was obvious borrowing, such as within the syncretic faiths, such as Santeria, Vodun, and etc., where there was an admixture of foreign components with an indigenous belief system. The power of magic rests, however, in its antinomian nature. It lives on the outer limits of what is traditional, acceptable, normal, and legal, while Gnosticism, for instance, can be understood as a kind of Christian esotericism. It borrowed heavily from Egyptian and Platonic sources that would have been anathema to Orthodox Christians. But this type of syncretism was a result of neighboring cultures meeting each other and borrowing from the religious and esoteric practices of the other. What is proposed in Grant's project is nothing less than a borrowing from whatever source, wherever in the world and whenever it existed. There was no sense of geographic proximity resulting in adulteration of one method or another, but of the deliberate search throughout the world's religions, esotericisms, mysticisms, and magics for methods that can be adapted to the overall agenda of Thelema. While this seems to have been Crowley's original intention as reflected, for instance, in the tables of correspondences between the world's religions that can be found in Liber 777, a project begun by the members of the Golden Dawn and greatly expanded by Crowley. It would be Grant who would make this type of deliberate and conscious syncretism a cornerstone of his cult. All right, so leaders of religions may quarrel with each other over beliefs and dogma. Devotees of religions may fight and kill each other over their differences, but mystics understand each other, regardless of their form or affiliation. Mystics are interested in techniques for achieving altered states of consciousness that can lead them to greater and deeper understanding. The attempt by some of the Thelemic circles to forge bonds between Tantra, Vodun, Kabbalah, ceremonial magic, and alchemy represents the point of view. This is not and should not be an attempt to find justification for one particular dogma over another, or to prop up one particular interpretation over another. It is instead a quest for truth and the discovery of workable techniques. Magicians are interested only in what works. Like scientists from both sides during the Cold War, there is curiosity and a willingness to learn from potential enemies as well as from friends. All right, so we're on the top of page 133. The danger in this approach lies in the facile comparisons made between different cultures as if their gods and rituals had exact equivalents among those in another completely different culture. There is evidence of this in Liber 777 and the tables of correspondences, which demonstrate the creators were often too quick to make associations between deities that may or may have not much in common. This tendency has been called universalism by the postmodern critics, who instead emphasize ethnic and cultural originality and uniqueness. Both of these approaches, in their extreme manifestations, are equally erroneous in my view. What Grant has done is to call these different techniques and approaches in order to discover knowledge that cultures other than his own had obtained through the use of methods that might have been neglected in the West due to ignorance or taboo. This is especially true when it comes to occult and esoteric techniques that are sexually based, are based upon a knowledge of human anatomy and physiology that has been put to use by those who perceived a spiritual analog to physical properties and functions. While a Western bias has been to downgrade the importance of the human body, or to see the human body as a potential source of sin and transgression, the Asian and African viewpoints reflect a respect for the body and an interest in examining biological functions in terms of their spiritual potential or their potential for attaining higher self or simply altered states of consciousness. All right, so this is important right here. Thus, sexuality and drugs became the province of non-Western esoteric practices after the rise of Christianity in Europe repressed and suppressed these ideas. While there is much more to Asian and African forms of spirituality and esotericism than sexuality and drugs, these represented the missing pieces in the Western repertoire. The story of the OTO has the founders traveling to the Middle East to obtain initiations in sex magic and related methods. All right, so this guy is a black man right here. Pascal Beverly Randolph, a major influence on modern Western esotericism, also claimed Middle Eastern initiations, and Aleister Crowley himself traveled through North Africa and India as well as Ceylon in search of African and Asian wisdom. Grant, however, took a...
I was just going to say, Pascal Beverly Randolph also said that most of the ills in the world can be resolved are the cause of man's inability to be able to sit in a room by himself with his own thoughts. Pretty much, a lot of the ills in the world are here because people don't sit down and just go within and think. You remember that, don't you?
Yep.
I was just bringing that out. That was one of the things he said. A lot of the ills in the world is caused by man's inability to sit in a room in silence with his own thoughts. Now that's not necessarily a quote, more so how you want to say that would be a paraphrase, but it's the same meaning. People don't think anymore. They just parrot what they got to say and they jump on bandwagons and all that. But anyway, carry on.
All right. Okay, so where's we at? Okay, all right, what was there? Okay, so Grant, however, took a more organized approach to the subject and began collecting previously unknown or untranslated esoteric texts from these cultures, as well as building relationships with those who had already been initiated into those traditions. This included Michael Berto and David Kerwin, as we shall see. But Grant did not stop there. Other forms of creative spirituality were not immune to Grant's all-inclusive approach. Art and literature represented for Grant additional avenues to explore for greater understanding of the Thelemic project, as well as a source of other technologies that could become part of the magician's arsenal. Thus, the art of Osman Spare was given as much regard in Grant's cult as the writings of H.P. Lovecraft. While Lovecraft described the hideous practices of Asian and African cults in words, Spare canonized them in his art and his magical system. Grotesque human forms engaged in obscure rituals are powerful images in Spare's magical worldview, just as grotesque alien beings hold blind, omnipotent sway over humans in Lovecraft's world. Even more to the point, Spare understood that words, Lovecraft's material, have intrinsic magical power as well, and could be manipulated in such a way that the physical representation of a word or phrase could acquire occult potency. It was an attempt to use words as art forms, to reduce words to the ideas they represent, to bring them back to their original status as symbols, as hieroglyphics. Spare's system was atavistic, a going back in time to the period when writing was first being invented, a time when the written word held tremendous magical power and could be interpreted only by the initiates, the priests. All right. Okay, so in this, spare system was as much a reference to ancient cults as it was to idiosyncratic occult method of his own devising. This was probably what attracted Grant in the first place, for Spare was a unique individual with a non-denominational approach to occultism. There was no formal Kabbalah in Spare's system, no node, no nod to Jewish or Christian context. Instead, it was a kind of Orientalist fantasy of occultism and acted as a reach beyond text as such to the deeper layers of consciousness, where our fears and our anxieties and our sexuality are located, somewhere in the limbic brain, perhaps curled around itself to the top of the spinal cord. One of the iconic forms of this type of Orientalist fantasy is the emphasis given to the Kurdish cult of the Yazidi. Since Grant devotes an entire chapter to the Yazidi in his Outer Gateways, it behooves us to investigate the religion further and try to separate the wheat from the chaff. All right, so here we have the cult of the peacock angel. All right, so we have some words from Robert E. Howard and H.P. Lovecraft. Here's Robert E. Howard from The Black Stone. I read of it first in the strange book of von Juntz, the German eccentric who lived so curiously and died in such grisly and mysterious fashion. It was my fortune to have access to his nameless cults in the original edition, the so-called Black Book, published in Dusseldorf in 1839, shortly before a hounding doom overtook the author. All right, so here we have H.P. Lovecraft, The Horror at Red Hook. He thought the ritual was some remnant of Nestorian Christianity, tinctured with the shamanism of Tibet. Most of the people he conjectured were of Mongoloid stock, originating somewhere in or near Kurdistan, and Malone could not help recalling the Kurdistan is the lands of the Yazidis, last survivors of the Persian devil worshippers. The Yazidis and the Tibetans, the same comparison would be made by Kenneth Grant decades later, and not in a fictional sense, but entirely seriously. While rumors of the Yazidi made their way into European travelogues, and archaeological literature in the 19th century, it wasn't until the early days of the 20th century that they became better known as the subject of one book that set the tone for so many future revelations. Isaiah Joseph's Devil Worship, the sacred books and traditions of the Yazidis. Published in 1919, Joseph's book contained the first English versions of the Black Book and the Revelation, two previously secret and unpublished texts said to be the core scriptures of the Yazidi faith, in which, according to Joseph, were translated from the Arabic. These texts are referenced in Grant's books and in other occult and esoteric works that touch on the Yazidi cults. Recent scholarship, however, has shown that these two texts are most likely the result of a hoax perpetrated by a well-known antiquities dealer and forger of documents, and are not actual Yazidi texts. The Yazidis are said to possess what is largely an oral tradition composed of many disparate elements, including but not limited to those of Christian, Islamic, Jewish, and possibly Gnostic and Zoroastrian beliefs and practices. While they do speak of the Black Book that was written in heaven, their religion is based less on doctrine and more on the correct observance of ritual. That said, is also generally agreed that the texts of the published Black Book and Book of Revelation do accurately reflect the basic beliefs of the main Yazidi clans, even though they are not genuine Yazidi scriptures. Grant first mentions the Yazidis at the very outset of his 9-volume series on Thelemic magic. In the Magical Revival, first published in 1972, it is clear from the book and virtually all his subsequent works that he considered the Yazidi a core influence and an important spiritual tradition with links to Thelema and specifically to Crowley and Awaz. However, except for a single chapter in Outer Gateways, he repeats himself on the subject without adding any new material or justifying his concentration on the Yazidi. Much of his information is taken either from Joseph's work or from stray remarks by Massey, so Gerald Massey. The first basic ideas are these. First, the whole attraction of the Yazidi for both Crowley and Grant is the idea that they are devil worshippers. If not for this, they most probably would have been ignored, not only by Crowley and Grant, but by a number of 19th century explorers who mentioned them in travel logs on the Kurdish tribal areas. If there was an ancient sect in the Middle East that had been worshiping the devil since time immemorial, it would be an important element of fin de siècle, Orientalist fantasies about the Black Mask, Satanism, and witchcraft. Second, Grant has the idea, an echo of references found in Massey, that the Yazidi are descendants of an ancient Akkadian and Sumerian cultures that represented some of the oldest, if not the oldest, civilizations in the world, of which we have any written record, predating even the Egyptians. Well, that's the dynastic Egyptians. So they were predating the dynastic Egyptians. So they most likely were the pre-dynastic Egyptians. So they was pre-dynastic Egyptians. This fascination with origins is one of the hallmarks of the universalist approach to the study of religion and culture, and is also a component of ideas concerning spiritual succession and lineage. The first of these ideas, that the Yazidi are devil worshippers, is connected to the fact that Shaitan is an important element of the Yazidi belief system. Shaitan, or Satan, is the fallen angel who rebelled against God when humans were elevated in importance above the angels. To the Yazidi, Satan will be the first of God's creatures to enter heaven, as he will be the first to be forgiven. This reverence for Shaitan is reflected in the taboo associated with the sound sh, which the word Shaitan begins. Yazidi avoid using that word as much as possible because of its connection. This has led to the misunderstanding that the Yazidi actually worship Shaitan or Satan. Yet another point of the view on the subject is that the name Shaitan is so sacred and therefore unpronounceable by the pious that another form of address and identification had to be created to take its place in normal conversation. While it seems likely that the Yazidi do worship or at least reverence Shaitan and are aware of his demonic associations, they do not associate Shaitan with evil. Shaitan's sin was in refusing to bow down before man, the artificial intelligence, or the artificial human, claiming that he would bend knee. Claiming
that's some deep stuff right there. When you start talking about bowing down between man, artificial intelligence, that's the organic artificial intelligence. I'm gonna let your imagination.
Yeah, we already know what time it is.
And another thing I was going to mention, that the word shaitan is also a word that is used in the modern day Islam to express Satan. You see, but when you go back to the Sufis, the Sufis had a different way with those with woolly hairs. What Sufis mean? So those were pre-existing. Those were more pre-existing type Islamic people that were before these milk-colored Arabs that are claiming to be Egyptians and all this other stuff. You know what I'm saying? So when you talk about pre-dynastic, I mean, we talking about the people. We talking about not only the mound builders. We talking about the people that went into the ground. And when you start talking about Cthulhu being buried at the bottom of the sea or being buried, now we talking about the dead. And what is the most dead, comatose people walking this planet right now but the American Negro? But go ahead, let's carry on.
All right. Claiming that he would bend the knee to no other but God, as that is what God had commanded from the beginning. So God punished Shaitan for disobeying his second command, while honoring him for his commitment to obeying the first command, thus ensuring that Shaitan would be the first creature to be redeemed. The chief pronounceable object of worship among the Yazidi is known as Melek Tas, the so-called peacock angel, and has become another focus of Grant's work, as he associates the peacock with a host of entities and ideas that reinforce his overall concept of a Dark Lord. This is a subject we will examine shortly, but some observers have claimed that Melek Tas and Shaitan are one and the same. Indeed, the cosmologies and creation stories of the Yazidis tend to support this idea at times and to contradict it at others. In the absence of a written text, this confusion, at least to outsiders, is inevitable. The second issue of importance to Grant is the idea that the Yazidi are somehow descendants or survivors of the Sumerian. Grant's equations can be summarized as Sumer equals Yazidi equals Shaitan equals Awas. In order to address this idea, we have to ask, who are the Yazidi and where did they come from? This is a controversial area for ethnologists, politicians, and anthropologists and historians of religion alike. The Yazidi themselves claim an origin variously in India or in Sumer. To split the difference, there is a claim that they came from India to Sumer and are descendants of the Sumerians themselves. That they are presently considered a Kurdish clan is based mostly on their language. Most Yazidis speak a form of Kurdish known as Kurmanji, and upon the fact that their tribal lands are within Kurdish territory in northern Iraq and are often conterminous with Kurdish lands in other areas in Syria, Armenia, Azerbaijan, etc. This connection may also be due to the fact that the Kurds in general are subject to varying degrees of discrimination and outright genocide, such as under the regime of Saddam Hussein in Iraq, and the Yazidis are easily one of the most discriminated against clans in the world. The problem of the origin of the Yazidis, as well as the nature of the religious philosophy, is compounded by the fact that their leaders seem to say different things to different people, and is evidenced by the wide variety of academic and journalistic sources that all seem to contradict each other on essential points. The lack of definitive written scripture only adds to the confusion among outside observers. Combine this with violent upheavals to which the Yazidis have been subjected over hundreds of years, and which entailed the loss of land, documents, and near genocide of their people on religious and political grounds. And it is a wonder that they have survived as long as they have, and that their sacred shrine of Lalish, believed by them to be the center of the universe, still stands in northern Iraq near the Turkish border. For our purposes, however, there are actually several pieces of circumstantial evidence that indicate the Yazidis are closer to Grant's concept of them than first appear. In the first place, we remember from the previous chapter that the Egyptian god Set was fond of lettuce, and that is how he was tricked into consuming the semen of Horus. Oddly, the consumption of lettuce is taboo among the Yazidis. The exoteric explanation for this is that the word for lettuce sounds too similar to the name of one of their prophets. But if the name Shaitan is indeed a version of the Egyptian name Set, then the lettuce taboo makes perfect sense. Another strange coincidence, which is no coincidences out here, lies in the fact that the Kurdish word for God is Kuda, or Lord. We cannot help but recognize the similarity between Kuda and Kutu, the Sumerian word for the biblical city of Gudua or Kuta, which, according to Slangcraft recension of the Necronomicon, is the basis for the name of Lovecraft's Cthulhu, or Man of Kuta, or Man of Kutu, Cthulhu. Kuta was ruled by the Sumerian god Nergal and was believed to be the gate to the underworld, which once again supports a Sumerian and Babylonian connection to the Yazidis, who do, after all, live in a region that was once part of the Babylonian Empire. Indeed, the ancient site of Nineveh is not far from Lalish and the modern Iraq city of Mosul. All that while there is no proof that the Yazidis are descendants of the Sumerians or even from another migrating tribe from northern India or Persia, their religion and culture is distinct from Islamic, Christian, and Jewish practices and theologies. One of their most revered leaders, Sheikh Adi, was by most accounts a Sufi mystic, while many other observers agree that the Yazidi religion is syncretic, a combination of various elements from other religious practices, including most probably Persian Zoroastrianism, in some ways like Santeria and other African religions that mix Roman Catholic iconography and ritual with indigenous African belief systems. This is very important, folks. The Sufi element is one that probably encouraged the incorporation of antinomian and even transgressive beliefs, such as the idea that the fallen angel will be the first to be redeemed along with the Yazidis. It was, after all, Sufism that was the first Islamic presence in the islands of Java and Sumatra in the 15th century and even earlier, and its influences can be seen there today in such practices as visiting graves, reverencing saints, etc., which are also hallmarks of Yazidism, but which are not accepted Islamic practice. In fact, Grant himself seems to make the connection between the syncretic forms of religion, expanded consciousness, and contact with supramundane entities. Okay, all right, so the Amenta of the Egyptians is identical to the Agartha of the Mongols, the latter with their pre-Buddhistic bone complex. The shamanistic rites with tantric implicits produced a weird combination of savage grotesquerie and the profound metaphysical adumbrations of the Sunyatavada. It is therefore in the Eskimo shamanistic and the bone impregnating Buddhism of Tibet, Mongolia, Java, and Sumatra, and the fundamental tenets of the Madhyamaka as permeating the Nyingmapa and Drukpa. The Drukpa cults are relevant to the Necronomicon gnosis. So you was mentioning the Sufis earlier, and they are saying that the Sufis are one of the most important tribes on the planet when it comes to mysticism, and they will be the first to be forgiven.
And they were known as, the Sufi itself means the ones with woolly hair. And you know, the thing that I have not checked into, and this is kind of off subject, but it is relative. We know that when it comes to Einstein's Rosenberg bridge, and they show about moving from the physical world to the spirit world, that when you have a spiral that is going counterclockwise, that's considered the left hand path. And that spiral, when it spins counterclockwise, and you see this in Judy K. King's book, it basically, when you as part of the science of being able to go, the Egyptian Book of the Dead and the Book of the Gates and all that stuff, when you go on the left hand path, when you go through the wormhole in order, or what we call the doo-wop, where you flipping from this world to the upside down world to the right upside world, you go through that particular point, which I see as the North Star, when you're going up the stairway of heaven. Now, when you go to the right hand path, that is reincarnation. They won't allow you to go in. So when you follow these Abrahamic religions and all these things, man, these are all right hand path ways grouped in what you call infusion. And the one thing that I want to say is, when you start looking at those with the curly hair, I'm wondering if the curls on the hair go in the left hand path. Is the whole point why I said all that. Because they say the hair is antennas, the curly hair of what you want to call the Negroid peoples. They have the kinky hair and even the kinky pubic hair, and I guarantee you that hair probably spirals counterclockwise. But now, even when you start looking into basically when they show you the symbols of demons, they show you the spiral going the left hand path, and they call that the way of the demon. So everything is pointed at spookism to scare you away from knowing who you are. You see what I'm saying? It's scaring you. And I said this before, and I know we will get back on this. I don't want to get too far out of this, because, we start doing our actual podcast where we start covering subject matter. Because, you understand, we teaching about the esoteric side of it, and also, but you got to live in this illusion side too, because it's just as important. When you're an eternal being, man, you got to occupy your mind for an eternity. And like I tell people, a lot of people come up with a lot of different things, man, in this existence. There is enough fuckery in this existence. If you stay trapped here, you can stay trapped in this existence for eternity and never run out of stuff to run into. The fact is, do you want to stay trapped on this level, in this realm, for eternity? And that's hell. But let's carry on, bro.
All right. We got at least maybe about I'll say maybe about 30 more pages tonight, folks.
Oh,
just hang in there.
I want to mention to you was when they talk about Cthulhu. Remember, we was in there talking about the Kutu and the man from Kutu and all that. But one of the things that they mentioned in there was Cthulhu, and Cthulhu is also what is used in the Tibetan Book of the Dead, which means one that was dead but has arisen. So that is another form of talking about Cthulhu himself, which ain't nothing but you, the dead Negro, the dead nigger, Cthulhu. And you sitting down there projecting everything outside of you. You got a most high for everything, and you wanna worship everything. You want to look outside for everything instead of going inside. And that's all right if that's what you want to do. I ain't got a problem with that, because you can't teach somebody to find themselves. They got to find themselves for themselves. Oh, we not putting the information out here. I ain't trying to coerce anybody to believe anything I got to say. Matter of fact, you can look at me as being crazy and not know what the hell I'm talking about. Because some of the stuff that I can tell you, man, you're not going to believe it anyway. But what I'm trying to tell you is, you got people working all this kind of magic. But Bobby Hemmett told you himself, man, some of the best magic is where you can get to the point where you work directly with these entities, man, and they be working for you sometime, and you ain't even got to ask them to work for you. Man, I have stuff, man, when motherfuckers be sending shit to me, man, to try to get at me, hell. And I wake up, or they try to come at me, man, I catch them, and I'm like, man, I start laughing, because I ain't going to do nothing but recruit them. How the hell they going to hurt me? How you going to send my energy at me? All they doing is waking me up and let me know that some fool is trying to send something at you. And I'm like, I'm sitting down saying, do we want to wipe out his bloodline or not? You know what I'm saying? But anyway, let's carry on.
All right. Okay. So, without going into detail on the definitions of the Buddhist terms, the first impression one gets from that passage is that Grant is playing fast and loose with his attributions by linking Amenta, the Egyptian land of the dead, to Agartha, the fabled underground city believed hidden somewhere in the Himalayas. That there may be a close connection between the indigenous bone religion of Tibet and tantric practices is being debated by scholars of the literature, as is the idea that bone is a survival of an older shamanistic cult, which certainly seems to be the case. Grant's boldness, however, lies more in making the case that Tibetan Buddhism, which is primarily tantric, is somehow cognate with Egyptian mysteries and the Necronomicon, and that savage grotesquerie and profound metaphysical adumbrations can combine a new kind of spiritual methodology. But this is Grant's forte. Modern Western magic is a refusal to accept the position of the post-modernism that each culture is unique and owes nothing to other cultures when similar ideas, symbols, and rituals are involved. As a magical operator in the modern world, one has to embrace a kind of neo-universalism in which one recognizes the existence of a symbol structure representing an underlying reality behind all observed phenomena. The expert manipulation of those symbols results in changes in phenomena. The magician is thus sensitive to the power and nature of symbols, including symbolic action, symbolic sounds, smells, and nature, etc., and draw inferences from diverse cultures and times. Just as human biology, the same whether one is a native Tibetan or African or European, etc. And even though there may be superficial differences and variations in language, food, and so forth, the symbol systems of different cultures may reveal superficial differences as a result of geographic, history, and even religion. But the states of consciousness represented by these symbols are identically or nearly so. Okay, so we'll go down to as noted. As noted previously, the magician is not a member of the congregation of any religion. The magician is a priest and an independent spiritual specialist whose interest solely resides in effective methods, which are rituals, and convenient modes of analysis, which is symbol systems. Thus, the emphasis on cults versus religions. For a cult is a laboratory of ritual and dangerous practice. It may be a matter of opinion as to whether the ritual came before the dogma or vice versa, but it has been demonstrated in the case of religions as desperate as the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in Scientology, and their origins are to be found in magical, that is to say, occult ritual. The dogmas came later. Thus, when we speak of the Yazidi religion, we are struck by the fact that the emphasis seems to be on correct ritual practice rather than doctrine. This is controversy over whether or not the Yazidi have a written sacred text. Their scripture seems to reside in the chants, songs, and prayers that are memorized by the faithful and by their ritual specialists. There is also an emphasis on genetic purity, and Yazidi may not marry outside the faith, and there is no possibility of an outsider converting to Yazidism. This association of the body, the blood, the flesh with religious purity and acceptability is an echo of the occult preoccupations of many different cultures and religious affiliations. It is also a hallmark of cultic practice, the desire to cut off a group from the outside world in order to maintain the group's physical, emotional, and spiritual integrity is, among other things, a form of distrust of the other, but it is also a way to switch tables by making the mainstream group the order. In the case of the Yazidi, this is taken a step further when they identify themselves with the supreme icon of the other in the Western world, the fallen angel, Shaitan. The relationship to the form of the Dark Lord is complex. On one hand, Shaitan is an emblem of bad luck that inspires fear. On the other hand, he is the Lord of the angelic hosts and is also known as the Lord of Power. This rather schizoid construct is so reminiscent of the way the Egyptians considered Set as to be virtually identical. To Grant, the peacock symbol is particularly important, for he sees in the rainbow-hued spread of feathers a reference to the kalas, the spiritual essences secreted by the female partner in tantric rituals. While it is possible that the Yazidis have their origin in India, as has been claimed, there is no indication that the present time that anything resembling sexual rituals or tantra is known among them. Yet, the peacock itself is a curious emblem for a Kurdish clan in northern Iraq. To worship for peacocks are not native to that country, while they are more common in India. The portals that lead to the inner chambers of Yazidi shrines are often adorned with carvings of snakes. The snake is shown as rising from the ground and appears to be a vertical decoration on the right-hand side of the entrance. The appearance of a snake in the context further led observers to believe that there was something vaguely satanic about the Yazidis, since the serpent is a symbol of evil and the devil in Judeo-Christian religions. It was the serpent who tempted Eve in the Garden of Eden, leading to the fall of humanity from paradise. In Egypt, of course, it was identified with Apophis, the evil creature intent on devouring the bark of Ra. But in Indian yoga and Tantra, the serpent represents the cold energy at the base of the spine, known as Kundalini. The fact that the Yazidi serpent is depicted vertically alongside the entrance to the sacred shrine may be further circumstantial evidence of a connection with Indian beliefs, as a vertical serpent would be an obvious reference to the raising of Kundalini, which is the goal of Kundalini yoga, as it is some forms of Tantra. However, there is no evidence for the existence of a Yazidi Tantra. One of Aleister Crowley's associates during his sojourn in the United States in 1919 was the noted author and adventurer William Seabrook. Fascinated by the occult and foreign locals, Seabrook had written a number of popular books and magazine articles on his travels in Africa and Middle East, and the Middle East and the Caribbean, and even claimed to have eaten human flesh on at least one occasion. Seabrook's works have been criticized by anthropologists who doubt his ability or his desire to separate reality from fantasy, but he stands at the crossroads of the topics that so fascinated Kenneth Grant, the Yazidis, witchcraft, and Vodun. In addition, as a friend of Crowley, he seems to be excellently positioned as a source for the beliefs and inspirations behind Grant's overall thesis. When it comes to the Yazidis, Seabrook claims that these devil worshippers maintain a network of 7 towers across the Middle East, Central, and East Asia, stretching across Asia from North Manchuria through Tibet, west through Persia, and ending in Kurdistan was a chain of 7 towers on isolated mountaintops, and in each of those towers sat continuously a priest of Satan, who, by broadcasting occult vibrations, controlled the destinies of the world for evil. There is no further evidence of this for this claim other than Seabrook's own statements, and it is possible that the towers one sees at Kalish and other Yazidi shrines were the inspiration for this idea. Yazidi sacred architecture is unique. Their shrines are in the shape of fluted cones surmounted by a golden ball that is said to represent the sun. At the base of the cone is opening through there is an opening through which one can see a fire burning. The fire is an eternal flame, tended by the Yazidis and thus reminiscent of Zoroastrian practice. If the Yazidi faith truly represents a survival of Persian Zoroastrianism, then there is some truth to Seabrook's statement that their towers extend through Asia, for the Zoroastrians themselves have survived in India and Pakistan, where they are known as Parsis. Forced to flee Persia, Iran, rather than convert to Islam in the 8th and 9th centuries, the Zoroastrian community found themselves in Pakistan near Karachi, and in India in the Gujarat region in Mumbai, the former Bombay. There is several fire temples in the Mumbai area where Zoroastrians, now known as Parsis from the word for Persian, have become pillars of the Indian community, well known for their charitable works. They also practice a form of sky burial known as the Towers of Silence. Because the elements are considered sacred, the Parsis leave their dead on top of these towers as food for vultures. To bury a corpse is considered a defilement of the earth, and to burn a corpse is considered a defilement of fire, which is a sacred symbol in Zoroastrianism. In Mumbai, these towers are located on Malabar Hill, in what is now an upscale neighborhood where they have become controversial due to the fact that the vulture population is declining, and the presence of certain antibiotics in the dead bodies results in the corpse taking longer and longer to decay. It should be noted that sky burial is also a feature of Tibetan religions and cultural practice, where the dead are left in the open air as food for carrion birds. It is possible that the unique tower architecture of the Yazidis was conflated with the Towers of Silence in Mumbai to give Seabrook the idea that there was a network of Yazidi towers stretching from Kurdistan to Tibet and Manchuria through Persia. Further, there are still Zoroastrians living in Iran, especially in the city of Yazd, which boasts a fire temple whose flame has been burning steadily since the 5th century. The similarity in name between Yazd and the Yazidi has been noted by several authors, but there is no consensus of opinion as to where the name Yazid or Yazidi originated, or even what it actually means. However, there is no evidence that there are priests of Satan who sit atop these towers broadcasting occult vibrations for evil purposes. There are, however, certain sites sacred to the Yazidis which have for Grant occult significance. Basing his information on Ishia Joseph's The Devil Worshippers, but without attribution, he mentions 5 cult zones, one of which is Lalish, the center of the Yazidi religion already mentioned, and another which is called variously Wiransar or Goransar, meaning the sunken city, which recalls the sunken city of Rayleigh, where the great Cthulhu waits dreaming. We are now in a position to appreciate Crowley's claim to have continued in and through Thelema, the major tenets of the ascetic cult. As mentioned previously, Crowley believed his supramundane contact and holy guardian angel Awaz to have been a god of ancient Sumer. The Yazidis claim a Sumerian ancestry for their people and their religion, and indeed reverence a form of Shaitan or Set. Further, the official seal of the Yazidi clan depicts not only the peacock of Melektas, but also cuneiform inscriptions, plus the ancient Sumerian cuneiform symbol for God, a 8-pointed star, thus showing their insistence on an ancient Mesopotamian origin for their faith. All of this data is consistent with what Grant calls the Necronomicon gnosis. The only lengthy examination of the Yazidi in Grant's work appears as a single chapter in The Outer Gateways. The magical significance of Yazidi symbolism in that chapter, Grant associates the Yazidis with a number of other religions, cults, myths, practices, etc., with a heavy reliance upon coincidences in numerology, similar sounding words, etc., all with a view toward demonstrating that the Yazidis are the inheritors of an ancient magical Typhonian current that erupted in the system of Thelema as practiced by Crowley. Crowley himself implies as much, of course, but Grant attempts to prove this connection and elaborate upon it. The problem with his approach is that it is based almost entirely on the few scraps of information available to the Yazidis and a handful of outdated and unreliable sources such as Seabrook, which are then tied into the grand design using the most tenuous of associations. Thus, for Grant, the peacock is a phallic symbol because the eyes of the peacock's feathers represents the mutus of the phallus, which is why the cock was a typical of Yazid. And the eyes and the tail of the peacock are the mutus, and the phallus of Yazid are equally connoted and are resumed in the glyph of the eye in the triangle, which forms part of the emblem of the OTO. Calf signifies both the palm of the hand and the calf ape, which typified, among other things, the open eye, or the exposed mutus, or the circumcised penis in a state of erection, thus denoting the ever wakeful one. One is tempted to say that sometimes a cigar is just a cigar. However, we begin to realize that virtually everything in the cosmos can be interpreted sexually or using sexual metaphor, and that this is a hallmark of the twilight language used by occultists, alchemists, and mystics as a kind of meta-language for discussing otherwise ineffable or unspeakable concepts. There is only one process in the universe, and every science, every art, every religion, every field of occult knowledge can be discussed and investigated using the language of the process. Thus, using sexual metaphor, one can describe ecstatic, mystical states, as well as the transmutation of lead into gold. Crowley himself makes this point when he writes, "I have myself constructed numerous ceremonies where it is frankly admitted that religious enthusiasm is primarily sexual in character. I have insisted that sexual incitement is merely a degraded form of divine ecstasy." And you can learn more things about that in books on like tantric sex. The divine ecstasy is still only a means towards an end. Ecstasy can be chemically induced or brought about by various other means, none of which would necessarily result in spiritual illumination, acquisition of occult powers, etc. Intensive meditation of the type enjoyed by anchorites and hermits of various disciplines also results in divine ecstasy. Minus the overtly sexual components, the magical path represented by Crowley and by his mentors in the Golden Dawn, however, sees emotional and psychological states as reflective of spiritual qualities that may or may not be perceived as good or evil in and of themselves. These states are only levels of understanding of the types of experiences that do not carry moral loads, but are informational. They are interpreted within a specific cultural concept, such as the Kabbalistic tree of life, or any other complete cosmological system that makes a space for all forms of human experiences, including the divine and the demonic. In order for Crowley's system to be the complete cosmology that any magical practice demands, it must make room for what Western spiritual experiences would consider demonic, satanic. There are, after all, two keys of Solomon in the repertoire of the Golden Dawn: the greater key, which is concerned with angelic and planetarian magic, and the lesser key, or Gotia, which is wholly involved with the raising of demons. Both are necessary, and it is the peculiar characteristic of sexuality that it can be a greater key, an expression of love, respect, fidelity, a means of reproduction and the survival of the species, a symbol of union with the divine, and a lesser key, an avenue for the manifestation of the darkest desires of human being, of sadism, masochism, and all the demons of the craft being grimoire. Sexual feeling is really the root of all ethics, and no doubt of asceticism and religion. The sublimest virtues, even the sacrifice of self, may spring from sexual life, which, however, on account of its sensual power, may easily degenerate into the lowest passion and basest vice. Love unbridled is a volcano that burns down and lays waste all around it. It is an abyss that devours all honor, substance, and health. Thus, at its core, sexuality is as pure as atomic energy. It can be used for peaceful purposes or for creating weapons. The irony lies in the fact that it may sometimes be necessary to have an atomic bomb, that for the species to survive, a means of protection is often required. Thus is the basis of Tantra, which sees sexuality a metaphor as the creative process as a means of uniting the divine and as a means of acquiring occult powers. It is also as good a description as any other double nature of Set in the Egyptian context, and why Set is associated with sexual ritual and magic by Grant. While many of the rituals of the Azeti are largely secret, to which outsiders are rarely, if ever, invited, there is still no evidence that they engage in sexual ceremonies or elaborate tantric style magical procedures. They may satisfy the requirements of Crowley and Grant that they represent a connection with ancient Sumer and with the worship of the old god Shaitan or Set. And while such may be romanticized projections by Orientalist observers, what is to be respected is that they have not abandoned their faith, even under dire oppression, by a host of hostile entities. They maintain their ritual purity, their sacred calendar, their beliefs, and their rights in the face of Iraq, Russian, Muslim, and even Kurdish oppression. They
Opposition.
refuse opposition. They refuse to intermarry or to accept outsiders into their religion, a religion that is identified not only with their beliefs but with their ethnicity as well. It is the mere fact of their existence that has argued and excited European and American occultists, for here is a clan whose religion is far removed from anything else in the region as to appear bizarre to outsiders, and who claim an origin in the vanished civilization of Sumer, and who worship a god that some insist is the Dark Lord himself. All right, anything on that, Mad Hatter, before we get into the Afro-Caribbean section?
Yeah, I was just gonna say when they speak about the book of damn it, what was that thing we were talking about, the Necronomicon. I just realized that I have one of the books, but one of the books I just ordered was the Necronomicon and the Dead Names, edited by George Hayes. That was the one that was recommended by Bobby Hemmett, that he was saying that he breaks down these different spirits, or these entities, in the Necronomicon, and people have referred to these particular uh, energies, or what you want to call spirits or gods, as being evil. But as we know, like I said, I don't see no such thing as an evil spirit. I mean, I see them as strong entities, very strong. And the older they are, the stronger they are. And that's what I want. I don't want no. I'll deal with some weak entities just to have some fun, man. But I want them strong ones. I want the ones that make my hair raise up when they come in here. You know what I'm saying? So, that the ones that I can feel tingling through my body. But we'll cover some more later on. But it was something else that I had wanted to mention, but I didn't want to break your flow. But when we were talking about this, yeah, when we were talking about Set, basically another thing what Set was saying is when they was asking Set how, you remember they said to ask Set how can we be, what's the best way to worship a God? And Set said, worship God, I'll teach you how to become one. Now, another thing is I wanted to mention was, and I say this sometimes even on Twitter, a lot of people, man, they don't be paying me no damn attention. I don't care. But dogma. Dogma is rescinding your right as a god, because backwards it spells am God. And when you say dogma, you are reverting your power back to a projected energy for my sake. And even when you look at the Dogon, you hear about the Dogon people, and everybody talking about where we come from and all this. Everybody coming from Africa and all this. Dogon, they said the Dogon said we don't know nothing about no Africa. We come from the north. Now, if you take the Dogon tribe and you take their name backwards, it spells no God. These are some things that you need to understand. When I'm saying that, it means when I say about that, I'm talking about no exterior God, nothing outside of me. That's how I see it. Now, I could get even deeper than this, man, but when it comes down to the sheep, man, I could give them information and they still don't understand. But I will tell you this, to those who know, there is no light in the north. There's nothing but pure darkness. And that's where the fuck I came from. And where you came from. The north. We came from pure darkness. When we said, let there be light, that's where the hell we came from. And the Dogon told you we came from. Now, those who know understand what the hell I'm saying when I say there ain't no damn light in the north. And I will leave it there. Carry on, brother.
All right. Okay, so where we was at? Okay, so now we are on Obia and Wanga. So Obia is kind of like the Jamaican version of voodoo. On November 1st, 1907, there had come to the New Orleans police a frantic summons from the swamp and lagoon country to the south. The squatters there, mostly primitive but good-natured descendants of Lafitte's men, were in the grip of stark terror from an unknown thing which was stolen upon them in the night. It was voodoo, apparently, but voodoo of a more terrible sort that they had ever known. There were insane shouts and harrowing screams, soul-chilling chants, and dancing devil flames. And the frightened messengers added, the people could stand it no more. That's from H.P. Lovecraft's Call of Cthulhu. So here we have some Aleister Crowley. Also the mantras and spells, the obia and the wanga, the work of the wand and the work of the sword, these shall learn and teach. So even Crowley saying, man, I know we on this and that, but we got to learn what these niggas doing.
We gotta learn what these niggas doing. We ain't gonna be able to use it, but we want to use.
Yeah.
We want to learn what we can and use what we can. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Because,
Let's just see if this key can unlock this door. But if it can't, we tried.
We tried, and then we'll just take whatever we can and use it here in this light world or this illusion world and make it work for us the best it can. And I'm gonna tell you, man, you know, we gonna have to do a breakdown on Westworld, because Westworld is covering exactly what we're talking about. There's those who can go to the spirit world and those who have to go to their version of the spirit world. Huh?
Right.
You know. But anyway, you know, we used to break down a lot of stuff. We never really broke it down online, but we'll do that in our podcast in the future. But anyway, carry on, my brother.
All right. When we discuss the Yazidis, we are faced with very little accurate and reliable information and a lot of speculation. When we come to Afro-Caribbean aspect of the Necronomicon Gnosis, we are in a somewhat different position. While Haitian Vodun, commonly spelled voodoo, was just as vulnerable 100 years ago to wild speculation and hysteria as the devil-worshipping Yazidis, we have a greater store of solid information and documentation about Vodun and other Afro-Caribbean religions due to the intense interest shown by anthropologists and historians of religion in recent years. In addition, the presence of African origin populations in the Caribbean and large communities of Afro-Caribbean origin in the United States have made Western access to these cultures easy than it is where the Yazidi clans are concerned. Since the homelands and central shrines of the latter are scattered throughout the Middle East and Central Asia in war zones and areas hostile to outsiders, Vodun, Santeria, Palomayombe, and Lukumi share some elements in common with the Yazidis. They do not have a written scripture. They frequently have been confused with devil worship, and they represent a survival of ancient forms of religious experience in the case from Africa, a continent that they share with Egypt. And you know, it's funny that, you know, they always talk about Egypt as if it's a country that's a million miles away from Africa. You know, and they also talk about Iraq and Saudi Arabia and Dubai as if those are countries outside of not just the Egyptian empire, but even Africa, but all that is Africa.
Yes, sir.
So they have also been exploited to some extent by non-African occultists who see in their rituals methodologies of magical practice and the acquisition of altered states of consciousness that lead to greater spiritual power and abilities, especially when reinterpreted within European and American contexts. Probably the premier exponent of this type of synthesis is Michael Bertholtz, an important source for Grant. Bertholtz came to the attention of the broader occult community in the United States through his massive 600 plus page The Vodun Gnostic Workbook. But prior to the book's publication, he was already a subject of Grant's Typhonian trilogies. The first mention of Bertholtz and his unique form of Thelemic Gnostic Vodun appears in 2 chapters of Grant's Cults of the Shadows, which explain Bertholtz's system in terms that are both Thelemic and Lovecraftian, Indeed, Bertolds deliberately uses terminology and ideas from Lovecraft in his occult work, as well as terms and concepts that are uniquely his own. But Grant's initial fascination with Bertolds' work seems to be the fact that both he and Bertol explored the night side of the Tree of Life, the realm of the Dark Lord. In Bertol's case, he connected the dark side of the tree with some of the Vodun cults and practices that would be considered black magic in contemporary parlance. This, coupled with the Crowley and Lovecraftian references in Bertol, ignited a stream of consciousness in Grant that would heavily influence his later work. Bertol acknowledged the importance of sexual ritual, including Tantra, and associated it with various types of Afro-Caribbean practice, and all within a Thelemic context. This was the Obia and the Wanga, the missing elements from the Thelemic arsenal of occult methods and systems. Obia is a form of Afro-Caribbean magic, what is sometimes called hoodoo in the South. The practice, as it is known today, has its origins in Jamaica and consists mostly of casting spells as opposed to the more religious aspects of Haitian voodoo. There is evidence that the term comes from the Ashanti word Obayifo, meaning witch or wizard or even vampire. Thus, it has a negative connotation, wanga, sometimes spelled Owanga. On the other hand, refers specifically to a small bag used to hold charms, sometimes worn around the neck or kept in a safe place, similar to Native American medicine bag, except that the latter is usually worn or carried by a medicine man only, whereas the wanga may be prepared for anyone to wear, and usually for a specific purpose, such as love, money, health, etc., and dedicated to a specific Loa, one of the Afro-Caribbean gods. However, both Obia and Wanga are sometimes used as denoting Afro-Caribbean occultism in general. Wanga is sometimes thought to refer specifically to works of black or negative magic. What then is the meaning or intent behind the exhortation in the book of the law that one should learn and teach the Obia and the Wanga? Why did Awaz use the terms and avoid using, for instance, voodoo and Santeria? The two later are religions which have internally consistent cosmologies, pantheons, and rituals. Obia and Wanga are somewhat looser in their definitions, but more importantly, do not refer to religious dogmas per se, but to the practical side of religion, that is, magic. Obia and Wanga are occult methods used by Afro-Caribbean spiritual specialists, and that is what would have been important to the author of the Book of the Law. After all, the infamous chapter 3 makes it clear that all previous religions are black. However, as we have seen, the consensus of opinion seems to be both Obia and Wanga are black arts themselves. That is, they are considered what the Kabbalists would consider the darker and night side aspects of the Tree of Life, and may be associated with the Kalipov, the shattered shards of creation that are tantamount to demons. And the connective tissue to all of this is the focus of both Grant and Bertol on the sexual aspect of the dark mysteries. This is an obvious direction for occultists who represent the most transgressive of their breed, for the white magician is usually thought of being as, if not celibate, then more chaste than the average person, devoting his or her time and energy to good works, speaking with angels, and yearning for union with the divine, leading a life that would be considered conventionally moral and blameless. There is no mixing of the sexes in this type of occultism, or if there is, it is within the religiously sanctioned confines of matrimony. One only has to remember that the congregation in synagogues and mosques are separated by gender, that even Vedic practice in Indian keeps the sexes apart as much as possible. Christianity can be seen as a exception to this rule, and it is worthwhile to remember that the earliest Christian rituals known to the outside world took the form uh religious. Okay, so oh man. Well, let me restart. Okay, so there is no mixing of the sexes. One only has to remember that the congregations and synagogues and mosques are separated by gender, and that even Vedic practice in India keeps the sexes apart as much as possible. Christianity can be seen as the exception to this rule, and it is worthwhile to remember that the earliest Christian rituals known to the outside world took the form of the agape, or love feast, the gender mixed congregations that would meet in secret, often in catacombs or cemeteries, due to their persecution by the state and by other religious authorities. Thus, Christianity could be considered the Satanism of its day. So even in that, there's the book Seeing Through the Visible World by June Singer. And even in that book, she was talking about how the Gnostic Christians, they would have to meet in secret in graveyards at night.
And
So,
the sexual part is the part that even when I went up through Catholic school, it's funny that I was raised in the belly of the beast. My parents wasn't even Catholic. I went to Catholic school in New York City. And, it was wild because, I got to actually, I sat in there with the actual Italians and the Sicilians and the people from Naples. And I could go in some of the Italian neighborhoods, man, where most black people couldn't even go in. You know what I'm saying? And my father worked for Italians. He worked for basically these guys were like children of bosses. But anyway, it's kind of crazy because they speak about this when they were talking about the Christians. They blurry the line because when they start talking about the Christians had to meet in the catacombs in the graveyard, it's not the same Christianity you're gonna see when you go to a church. We talk about the Gnostic Christian. That's probably more like us. And the funny thing when you hear people talking about Christianity before Christ, they don't understand that because and I'm not getting racist here. White people got to understand this shit about black people trying to rewrite history. Motherfucker, we are history. We are the original. I don't give a fuck if you like it or not. You need it, whether you understand it or not understand it. You are of us. You are the recessive part of us. And I'm not saying that makes you any lesser. That just makes you. I'm not saying it's making you lesser. That just makes you a mutated gene, possibly even in some instances manipulated. And mixing of the genes and all this give you all this ethnicity or whatever. But when people start understanding, when they get to the point of thinking that everything is a competition, and you start wanting to really learn the knowledge, because even from my understanding, even Crowley was talking about how maybe it might take you several incarnations to get enough melanin in order to do what you got to do. Do you remember that conscious discernment?
yeah.
Well, I can't remember where we read this at and what book we were talking about when we used to have our little book study, but basically, he was saying that in a certain way that some people you will not be able to get into the spirit world. Sometimes it might take you several incarnations, and they also Judy K. King speaks about DNA transfer. What the hell you think she's talking about? You see what I'm saying? So instead of getting mad, instead of people getting mad, they ought to be happy in the fact that they, you have some of the people that you got some of the people that got less of the melanin than a lot of us, and they tap into that lesser melanin, and they do more shit than most of us doing walking around here right now. And you can get mad as you want. I take my hat off to them because I'm like, hey man, you taking what you got and you multiplying your talent. We going back to the Bible now, and I'm not saying that I live by the Bible, but there's some good stuff in the Bible. I'm not saying all is bad, but a lot of it's bullshit too. Now, I got some good shit in my trash can if you want to go in there, but I got a lot of bullshit in there too now. So I mean, just because you got some good shit there, don't mean that the whole thing is good. You know what I mean? If you want to dig through the baby diapers, or you want to dig through the fish bones or whatever, you know what I'm saying? Because you might go in there and find a half piece of eating candy or something, or a piece of cake. I mean, hell, have at it, brother. But anyway, well, I'll take you on the back road now in a minute. So let's get back to where we were at.
Yep, we ain't got to the good stuff yet.
But
All right,
that's
so
a real, when you get in the spirit and you a real occultist, this is what happens, man. It ain't no different than being in the church when they start playing that music. Ding 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 ding, and the motherfuckers start dancing and they start going all over, flopping all over the floor. I mean, they giving their credit to Jesus or whoever, but that's no more than your spirit, man, just basking in his own energy. Now, what I'm saying is, a lot of people don't understand there's a lot of these things and rituals that people do, man, is no more than gearing up your own energy. However, you got to gear it up, man. You can't teach a person how to get in touch with that energy. And some people need more incentive to get that energy going. And so you figured out. All I can tell you is, and I don't talk about my personal life too much, man, like you don't, because mother scratchers don't need to know. But you know how life works for us, man. Man, things just come together for us, and a lot of times we don't even be asking for it. Perfect example. I don't even want to get. All I'm trying to say is, hell, I thought I wasn't gonna get no money for a whole week, and come to find out, hell, I'm getting paid. You know what I'm saying? So, and I was okay with that. So I'm just saying, man, a lot of things happen to us, man, that we don't even ask about. Because I mean, Makuna Matata, I really live Makuna Matata. I really don't give a fuck about a lot. I don't worry about it, because whatever the hell I need, I'm gonna get. And I'm gonna tell you, I am a master manifester. I manifest whatever I need, and I manifest stuff that I don't even ask for. And of course, sometimes you're gonna have little issues here. You can have potholes in your lawn. You can have potholes in your road. But that don't mean you can have them all the time. But anyway, let's go on, because we got a lot to go through. So we need to get through it this year.
all
You got about
right.
20 more. You got about 17 more pages to go through.
All right, so, oh man, okay, so when genders are brought together in magical rituals, there is always the possibility that a sexual current will run through the group, particularly in the heightened, almost romantic atmosphere of a ceremony that is conducted secretly in candlelit with billowing clouds of perfumes and incense. Specially designed robes in appropriate colors and materials and so forth. One form of transgression. Occult ritual implies every other form, including the sexual. In addition, the appropriation of spiritual power, way or apart from normative socially sanctioned priesthoods, can be intoxicating. In the rites of Haitian Vodun, the above conditions are exceeded through the use of a battery of drums and at times other musical instruments. In these rituals, the focus is on the human body as the horse, to be ridden by the gods in a form of divine possession. At such times, the individual person is no longer present as an ego or superego in his or her own physical body, but has been momentarily dislodged by one of the Loa. The possessed person's body undergoes a subtle or sometimes not so subtle transformation as the personality of Urzuli, the goddess of love and passion, or perhaps of Baron Samedi, the god who controls access to the underworld, or any of the many other gods who take over and cause the possessed person to walk and act in accordance with the characteristics of the particular Loa. Okay, so let's go down to from a modernist perspective. From a modernist perspective, of course, this is hideous, an outrage against the original material and exploitation of an indigenous culture's spirituality. But that is true of all magic. Magic is, by its very nature, a method and not a faith or a dogma. Its practices transcend the cultural because they are concerned with altered states of consciousness and not with adherence to a particular law or tradition. This is how it is possible for Jewish mystics such as Shabtai Tzvi and Jacob Frank to convert to Islam and Christianity, respectively, and still maintain their following and their reputation as advanced adepts. This is how it was possible for an Aleister Crowley to incorporate yoga and quasi-tantric practices into his Thelema, even though he was an Englishman who received the Book of Law in Cairo, replete with Egyptian gods doing all the talking. In this context, the creative approach to spirituality of a Michael Berto is entirely consistent. There is virtually no form of occultism in the Western world that does not incorporate elements of other religions and other occult practices. The very liminality of occultism implies that otherness will be a constant determining factor in its construction, while Berto includes material from diverse sources to amplify his version of voodoo. He is not alone in examining this Afro-Caribbean system through the lens of other cultures and religions. While a purist may insist on a strict African interpretation of Vodun, denying any syncretism involving other religions such as Roman Catholicism or other mystical or magical systems, 20th century Haitian writers on the subject of frequently invoke Greek, Egyptian, and even Jewish terms and concepts as a means of expanding upon the rituals and the legends that inform it. This approach is condemned by the postmodern anthropologists and academics as inherently colonialist and racist. The projection of white Western insecurities about race, sexuality, and region onto a captive, savage population. The fact that some native Haitian authors on the subject contribute to this approach does not make the controversy any clearer. An early author who is sometimes cited in the literature is Arthur C. Hawley, writing in French under the pseudonym Ramael. His books are a melange of biblical references, Christian concepts, Afrocentrism, and a minimum of actual information on Vodun. His Les Demons du Culte Voodoo is the most referenced, but usually derisively. However, in a line often quoted, he does insist on a connection between Haitian Vodun and ancient Egyptian and Assyrian religion. This is the translation in English. It is in vain that hypocritical or violent processes have been used to shroud in darkness the brilliance of the mental evolution of the Negro. It is beyond doubt that the ancient Ethiopian, Egyptian, Assyrian civilizations must be credited to his account. It seems to us undeniable that the voodoo tradition descends in the direct line from the priesthood and the rites used in the temples of Ethiopia and Egypt. And we can't forget Assyria, which is Iraq, which we covered earlier, which ain't nothing but another part of Africa, the Middle East. So we just validated that. I don't get on here talking and saying, black power, this and that, and whoopie-woo and all of that. But
Ain't no need for that.
I didn't write it. I didn't write it. Peter Lavenda wrote it.
And
A
there ain't no
white man
need for
wrote
all
this.
that. I mean, what's the need for getting in somebody's face, trying to tell them, trying to explain to them why they're you're superior and they're inferior? That's lunacy.
I don't get in nobody's face. I don't do it online, and I'm not gonna do it here on the Shadow Realm podcast, because all I'm gonna do is I'm gonna come with scholarship, and I'm gonna let Peter Lavenda, a white man, tell you what he wrote. I didn't say this. Peter Lavenda said this. He's breaking down all of this scholarship in his bibliography. So you got to take it up with him. All right. So Holly called himself a Haitian esotericist, and this is borne out by his lengthy and sometimes incomprehensible study of voodoo through the lens of a kind of Kabbalah in which each letter of the Latin alphabet possesses mystical meanings, so that in analysis of any word, including the names of Vodun Loa, can yield a warehouse full of secondary and tertiary meanings. His emphasis is on this system rather than on Vodun itself, rendering his book of interest only to those studying early 20th century Haitian Francophone occult philosophy. All right, so we're going to skip over to the next page, 159. On this point, I personally have no doubt for Damballa, the divine mother, which means the universal negress, the great mother, heart that quickens humanity, is the only one able to achieve perfect solidarity based on love between the black and yellow races. This is Peter Lavenda writing this. Based on love between the black and yellow races, this is because Dame, great negress of heaven, is the patroness of each. La, the great little mulatto of heaven, is the pantheistic god of the others. So, the Haitian nation will turn or worship in the purest sense of brotherhood towards the rising sun and his son of light. And that is to say, in Masonic terms, towards the Grand Orient, personified by the Queen of the South and her son Hiram. Indeed, the health of the country depends rather on Freemasonry than the church. And voodoo is the mother of Freemasonry, as we have just had a glimpse in the preceding pages. Here, Holly shows us that he has an esoteric interpretation of the names of the gods of voodoo, dividing Damballa into separate syllables, each of which has its own meanings and relevance. This is something that Grant himself does to similar effect, as in the following word analysis from his 9th arc, the last in Typhonian Trilogy series. Frater Achad interpreted the 13th lettered word manifestation as concentrating the magical formula of the Aeon of Mayat, whose lesser cycle was to manifest through her daughter, Ma. This is correct so far as it goes, but there is more to it. The daughter typifies the Pythoness of Mayat, as the unawakened virgin priestess in her magnetic and oracular sleep, oracular sleep. The essential formula may be schematized thus. So you can find some of this information as well in the book Tantric Kali by Daniel Odier. Tantric Kali by Daniel Odier. All
Don't we
right,
have that
so
book?
yeah,
Yeah, I think
that's
we both got that book. Yes.
yeah.
Okay.
All right, so Ma means entranced, medium, lesser cycle of the 16 kalas. Ni, Amen, the hidden god, the sun between the sun. Set, Isis, Sothis. Festat, Cairo, the locus of the double current. Awas, new Isis. Aeon, the greater cycle, wherein the 17th kala is secreted, the ultimate and secretion. We will note that in both cases, there are references to the sun, and the Pythoness of Mayat may have something in common with Hali's Damballa. While Damballa normally is considered to be a male deity, his symbol is also a snake. In Hali's paragraph above cited, however, Damballa is a female since Hali focuses on the first syllable of the word, dam, and sees it in reference to the French word for woman, dame. So Damballa becomes for him the divine mother and universal negress, as well as the fons et origo of Freemasonry. While Hali is perhaps an unusual and suspect source for information of Vodun, we have a more professional expert in Milo Regard. Regard, born Emile Regard, wrote a number of books on Vodun, heavily illustrated by photographs of ceremonies and diagrams of Veves, which are the arcane symbols that attract the lower to the rituals. While the books are a comprehensive treatment of his subject, he also falls victim to the type of grand theories that obsess Hali. He links the practice of Vodun to Egypt and to Solomon's temple, among other places, and he quotes Hali approvingly in this instant, applying that he agrees with the Egyptian, Ethiopian, Assyrian roots of Vodun and their contributions to Western European esotericism and Freemasonry. Both Hali and Regard are Haitian authors, men who knew their country and its religious culture as well as anyone, but who wrote about it from a francophone point of view. Creole is the language of the people in Haiti, and French is the language of the government and the intellectual elite. An educated Haitian interested in religion and spirituality first would seek for information in French, which inevitably would lead to the fields of Martinism, Freemasonry, the various Gnostic churches, and authors like Eliphas Levi, and Pappus, Dr. N. Koss, and many others, all of whom did indeed exert an influence over European and American occultism, both through their books and through the organizations and secret societies they joined or founded. Hali and Regard would have found in these sources confirmation of what they already believed to be true, that their religious culture was part of continuum of
Yeah.
continuum of spiritual experiences that began in Africa, everywhere in Africa, including Egypt, the Sudan, and Ethiopia, and thus had tendrils extending as far as the salons of Paris and the secret societies of London, Germany, and elsewhere on the continent. It's the perceived racist attitude towards Vodun that irritates anthropologists, however. They will insist that Vodun is a religion, and while they do not deny the magical aspects of the religion, they will condemn any attempt to see Vodun anything smacking of the titillating or suggestive. The approach of Berthaud is attacked by experts who claim that he represents a colonialist and
Colonialist.
colonialist and
Colonialist. Stereotype.
racist stereotyping of voodoo of the type we find in Lovecraft, for instance. By associating voodoo with sexual rituals and contact with supramundane entities, with what many average observers would call black magic in a purely pejorative way and perhaps in a thinly veiled racist allusion, Berthaud is seen to be contributing to the Hollywood concept of vaudeville as voodoo, with all the weird rites and licentiousness with that the term suggests. All right, so we're going to go down to the bottom of this page for that second to last sentence. Among occultists, there are no such anxieties. A matter of fact, we can take it back to the top. There are problems with this analysis, however. It has become fashionable to assert that any interest in indigenous religions by white observers, be they academics and scholars or journalists and authors of popular books on the subject, is suspect. Edward Said implied as much in his groundbreaking book, Orientalism, when he castigated Western European attempts at describing Asia as rooted in colonialist and racist attitudes towards Asians, attitudes that were composed of equal parts of fear, disgust, and desire. While Said's thesis has been criticized recently, it is still a difficult hurdle for non-indigenous observers to overcome, for it is assumed that they are ipso facto tainted by the same vulnerabilities that is even more pronounced among those who go overboard in attacking other non-indigenous observers who they believe to be inappropriately reverent when it comes to religions like Vodun, for they can be accused of manifesting white guilt or some similar desire to be absolved of their racist historical crimes against non-white populations. It is truly a no-win situation, but usually is apparent in academic circles where the near impossibility of staying above the fray is pronounced. Among occultists, there are no such anxieties. In the quest for greater and greater occult power, all avenues are fair game. And since occultism can be viewed by some by largely psychological and emotional, the racial and sexual stereotypes of any cult can be mined for their connections to deeper psychological complexes in the operator. Yet, there is another problem for the mainstream apologists for Vodun, and that is that there are secret societies in Haiti that are responsible for some of the bad press that voodoo gets, and which gave us the infamous zombie powder, among other things. These societies specialize in those elements of voodoo that could be considered magic as differentiated from religion. Wade Davis has two written books on the subject of these societies, which were the basis of his ethnobiological fieldwork in Haiti, during which time he was actually initiated into one of these groups. The vigorous attempts by some anthropologists to downplay the more sinister aspects of the Haitian religion experience fall apart in the face of this type of scholarship. Of course, a case could be put that the Haitian secret societies such as Bizango, Zobok, the Sect Rouge bear as much relationship to traditional Vodun as the Church of Satan does to the Roman Catholic Church, but Davis demonstrates that there exists a much closer bond between the secret societies and normative Vodun. than one would suppose, and that these secret societies perform much the same function as the Illuminati or Freemasons are alleged to do in European countries. They are the real masters of the country, operating behind the scenes and meting out punishment where necessary to maintain order in the Haitian communities. Therefore, our purposes, we can acknowledge that what anthropologists call voodoo or vodun or voodoo or vodun, etc., represents an assembly of various African religions under one convenient umbrella, and that is a religion. It deserves the same respect as any other. But we must acknowledge that such things as curses, blood sacrifices, and even zombification also exist as part of the Haitian religious occult experience. Just as antinomian secret societies and satanic occult groups exist within the normative white European Christian and Jewish religious experience, and it is within the context of the Haitian secret societies, such as the Bazongo, that we find the greatest correlation with the ideas discussed by Berthaud and Grant. The element of Berthaud's unique cosmology that interests Grant is the idea that there are points, shards, or hot points, or power points in the universe that act as portals into other realms of experiences, as gates to the underworld. The adepts who are capable of entering these points at will are sometimes referred to as voltigeurs or leapers. In the Berthaud vernacular, these power points are located on the human body, as well as at specific areas of the earth and in the cosmos. In perfect microcosm, macrocosm symmetry, it follows that if these points can be located simultaneously in the body as well as in the heavens, for instance, then physical manipulation or stimulation of those points is equivalent to opening the celestial gates, and a tantric type process can be pursued that uses the body and its hidden resource as a vehicle for celestial and infernal exploration. As essential characteristics of Tantra is the understanding that psychobiological processes take place which alter consciousness. In rare instances, these processes may take place accidentally through some form of physical or emotional trauma, but more often they are the result of careful practice and deliberate application of occult methods such as yoga, meditation, pranayama, and other means of interfering with the normal functions of the human body. If the body is a laboratory and a temple combined, then changing any of the body's processes, such as control of breathing, heartbeat, contorting the limbs into uncomfortable positions for long periods of time, or even taking drugs that will alter either the physical or the mental activities of the operator, will produce a variety of results that are outside the normal range of human experience. The occultist uses the tools that are available to seek control over the body's autonomic nervous system, the system that regulates such things as breathing, heart rate, peristalsis, etc., as well, peristalsis, etc., as control over the mind's autonomic functions, processes that can be located in what the Freudians call the unconscious mind. This is all quite different from the way of the mystic in prayer who wants to unite with the divine through piety and good works. It is a mechanistic approach to consciousness and divinity that horrifies churchmen and the pious, offending them as much as do frank discussions of sexuality. The pious speak of love and marriage. Sex is either not mentioned or is couched in euphemism. The magician speaks of everything in terms of the use to be made of it, its pragmatic application to the desired goal. All right, so we have an excerpt here. So there is no attempt to offer any academic presentation of the material, no citations of scholarly works on Afro-Caribbean religion, juxtaposed with citations from the Vodun Gnostic workbook, just as there are no discussions of Roman Catholic doctrines or excerpts from the Lutheran prayer book. There is no devotional literature in magic. All right, so we'll head down to the bottom. Berthaud, like Grant, is obsessed with the dark side of esotericism. Traditional Kabbalah, alchemy, Freemasonry, Rosicrucianism are all ignored in favor of the more sinister aspects of the spiritual experience, and ways are sought to contact entities that are believed to exist in other dimensions, entities that are nevertheless understood to be capable of interacting with our own. These are alien beings in every sense of the term. They are not beautiful in any conventional sense. No angels with harps, no long-bearded prophets. These are monstrous shapes imagined by Lovecraft and other horror writers of his generation, except that for Berthaud and Grant, they are not figments of imagination and thus not real, but have an independent existence of their own. In the Berthaud and Grant cosmology, Lovecraft did not invent these creatures. He saw them in his dreams, which are a time-honored method of communicating with the unconscious mind in a modern sense, or with the spirit world in a more ancient context. The gods of Vodun may have begun the same way as the great Cthulhu and Nyarlathotep, and the methods of contacting the one may be used to contact the other, and with similar, even measurable results. What began in a dream may be contacted in a dream, or at least in a trance. The altered states so represented of spirit possession in Haiti and recognized as such by Lovecraft in the Call of Cthulhu are a way of redreaming the original dream, of going back to Guinea, to an African homeland that exists nowhere on Earth, yet everywhere on Earth. The point shards are elements of an occult matrix, places where one strand of the spider web crosses another. Taken together, they form a membrane over the cranium of the magical operator, like the touch screen on a computer monitor. It is where Berthaud's voodoo meets Grant's tantra, that the intellectual and conceptual explosion takes place that leads the Typhonian order into the realm of the Dark Lord. All right, so in pursuit of gold. All right. It was most likely observing the meetings of David Kerwin and Aleister Crowley that provided Kenneth Grant with the impetus he needed to realize the Indian Tantra held the key to the mysteries of the OTO, as well as to all of Western occultism itself. While Grant usually quotes discredited texts on the Yazidis and on Vodun, it is the realm of Indian religion and magic where he is somewhat surer ground, even as he makes at times reckless use of the text. For many Western societies, occultists draw to magic through the words of Crowley or of the other magicians who came out of the Golden Dawn environment. Grant's books were the first that introduced them to Tantra and to the possibility of this rather messy yet strikingly beautiful tradition. Messy in the sense that no one can agree on what Tantra is powerful because it deals with magical processes in remarkably clear language. Of all the unspeakable cults in Grant's repertoire, Tantra is where his erudition, although subject to serious criticism by actual tantrikas, and his grasp for the terminology shines through. Grant is a knowledgeable non-initiate when it comes to Tantra, but it must be said that he makes mistakes in nomenclature, definitions, which may be more to lack of evidence to published materials, and his own lack of initiation into tantric circle, than to any desire to confuse or bloviate. The value in Grant's description of the tantric rites and concept lies in the fact that it is the first time for many Western occultists that they have been exposed to this material and serves as an inducement to conduct their journey. Independent research. Further, while Tantrikas may object to Grant's cavalier use of tantric terms, the concepts to further his own investigations of the Dark Lord, it is entirely consistent with Bertolt's approach to Vodun and Crowley's approach to etymology and Yazidism. That is not to absolve those magicians from responsibility to be accurate insofar as possible, but it does demonstrate the essential bricolage tendency of Western occultists who strive to reach beyond a Judeo-Christian framework and into other foreign realms. This is the lure of Babylon, of course, the ultimate foreigner and seducer of spiritual aspirants since time immemorial. What's your thoughts about that, Mad Hatter?
Come again now.
I was saying, what are your thoughts about that?
About as far as what Peter Lavenda was saying as far as Grant. Yeah, I mean, I like Grant, and you can't really expect him to know any more than what was available to him. But as a whole, I mean, he touched on what he was able to get his hands on, or within the limits of his understanding, and I think he brought it out a little further than Crowley. And but I like Peter Lavenda, because he kind of even brings out a little further, and I guess it's just because didn't he write the American Grimoires? Didn't he write those 3 books too? Peter Lavenda.
Yeah.
Yeah, the 3 books. Cause you gave me one as a present. I had to buy books 1 and 3, and you gave me 2 as a present. But yeah. So, and there's some things that I was going to say about when you were talking about, like when they were talking about giving credit to the black people and all, the Negro or whatever, you got a lot of people out here wanting to argue with you about being, about white people were the Egyptians. Now we do know that they were some conquerors that would be considered of the Caucasian race towards the latter part of the dynasties that might have came in there. But you remember he talked about geromancy. And when you talk about geromancy has a book called In the Beginning. And in his book, he outlined that the you know what I was getting ready. I want to pull it out because I don't want to say it wrong. But the Nessie and the Nessie and the man, I can't remember, man. Man, you know, I'm saying my father said, man, I done forgot more than most people remember. You know, I done been through so much damn gnosis. But we do know these two people, which are the Nessie and the I'm about to pull this book out right now. Created the Himnu and the Tamahu. And when we talk about the Himnu and the Tamahu, the one thing people don't realize is they don't talk about the Amu, which is the prototype to the Tamahu. So every time you speak about Asians, they always thinking about these high yellow people. But you know, they were brown skinned Asians and they were dark skinned Asians. You know what I'm saying? So, you know, another thing that I see people fail to talk about, and you know, it's almost like people are trying to make us forget about this. You don't hear nobody talking about Pangea, the supercontinent, where all these continents were a part of. And man lived all over this continent. So, you know, we keep talking about everything coming from Africa. But I mean, when you talk about Pangea, when you break it down to Pan and Gea, you see what I'm saying? Those are polarities. When you sit, but at the same time, if you want to bring it to the physical, you talk about Pangea, and you have people that lived all over this globe, man. So you know, if you had one incarnated being that lived all over this planet, he came in with what they're talking about is, and I'm getting all this to say that in the bottom line, we talking about the melanin. And people can get mad as they hell as they want to get, but we talking about the damn melanin. That's what we talking about. That's what the hell Cthulhu is. That's what it all is about. So when he talks about the Negro race or whatever he's talking about, and he's talking about the alien, he's talking about Cthulhu, you talking about Cthulhu, you talking about Cthulhu, whatever the hell you want to call it. You talking about the melanin, the philosopher's stone, whatever you want to call it. You know what I'm saying? It's the damn melanin. And then, you know, all the stuff, you know, people take the gnosis and they try to make the gnosis work to cater to their physiological makeup. And that's okay. Because you gotta utilize what you got to give yourself some props. But if you really want to know the truth, then you need to be just like Peter Lavenda is and be honest with your assessment of what you're reading. And when you work from a place of honesty, it doesn't become a competition. It becomes an education or a learning that can help you to be able to expand your abilities and consciousness. Because you can't expand your abilities and consciousness in lies. And you can bullshit me. You can bullshit a lot of people out there. You can bullshit your followers. But when it comes time to hit that spirit world, you are not going to bullshit the spirit world. I guarantee you this. You're not going to do it. And you're going to find yourself on your deathbed just like Crowley was and just like Lavenda was, saying something's wrong. It ain't supposed to be like this. Because you ain't fucking around with no spirit world. And you get as mad as hell as you want to get. I don't care. But anyway, what was that page, 20? I'm trying to find this page here.
I don't know, man. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm going to probably stop there for the night.
Yeah, man.
I went and got me some Cheetos out the kitchen.
Well, look here, man. I knew I was getting ready to get on the subject. Are you still there?
I'm there. I just wanted to let you off the leash on the people.
Okay. Oh, you already cut me off?
Nah. We still live.
Oh, well, what I was saying was, yeah, that's probably a subject for a podcast. And I'm like you, man. I'm not trying to be racist, man. I'm not trying to pull no clout. I'm not trying to say someone's less than me. I'm just about getting to the bottom of the daggone truth, man. Because you can work with the truth. And once you work with the truth, for those who want to know, man, it's a beautiful place to start from, and it's a beautiful place to grow from. You know. But as far as Peter Lavenda is concerned, I like him, and I wouldn't be surprised if he technically has enough in there where he might have. I mean, man, he you know, I mean, for him to be as sincere as he is, man, I got to give him his props, man. There's got to be something special about him, you know. Now, I have the version of the Necronomicon, which is the best weird tales by H.P. Lovecraft, which is I told you is a commemorative form, but I just ordered the other one, and it might be out in my mailbox now. I just got to go check it since they didn't bring it to the door. By Hayes, edited by George Hayes, I believe his name is, talking about the names of the dead, and that might give us some extra insight to that. And probably before we do the next, I'll read up on that a little bit.
All right, well, we're going to stop on that page for the night, and then we will be back in a few days, folks. We'll finish up the end of that chapter, and we'll get into chapter 4 as well.
10-4, man.
All right.
Good night for the night.